Well, hello. This is, I guess, the first episode of what I'll call trying to make sense out of my affect and data science class. My name is Phil Beskid, and so this is a course that's part of the PhD program for American Culture Studies at Bowling Green State University, to which I've applied and am part of, and I'm also currently an associate professor in the School of Media and Communication at the same school. So I'm chipping away at the PhD and doing my best at it. So today with me is my lovely wife, Rachel Beskid.
Hi.
Thanks so much for doing this with me.
You're welcome.
If it weren't for your support in a lot of different ways, it would be much more challenging to get through all this stuff. So I appreciate your support in some of the obvious ways with my current situation, but also your support in, willingness to even help me make sense out of some of the stuff that I've been trying to study.
Yes. It's very, there's a lot of words, a lot of new words.
Sometimes it feels like they're making up words. I don't know if you would say the same thing out of some of the readings that I've shared with you, but it feels like sometimes those are new words. They're not just words that are maybe rarely heard. They're just like completely new.
Well, I don't think I have enough knowledge of all the words that are there to know if they're new words, but sometimes I would say that it feels like it's extra to prove like perhaps like this is scholastic, or that this is like official, or some sort of like the terminology feels like just like the simple term is like fluffy, like it's too much, like you could probably use other words and more people would understand. Like it almost is like a filter of like, so normal people can't read it.
But then I suppose it wouldn't be PhD level stuff, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean, sure. I don't know that it has to be that way. You don't have to just use big words to have big ideas.
That's true. So really the point of this recording is to complement some like weekly assignments that we have where we were given a selection of different texts that would apply to the topics covered in this course. And we were given the choice of selecting two of those. And every week we sort of have to, pace ourselves. It's sort of a choose your own adventure. Get through these two texts that you've selected for yourself. Make some notes specifically about words that maybe you're unfamiliar with or concepts, and make connections between the two different aspects of this class, which is affect and data science. Try to make connections between those two things, along with, trying to decipher how you might use those concepts or those connections as frameworks for research in whatever area is particular to you. So I haven't really selected too much of an area yet, but some of my other culture studies compadres know very specifically what they want to do, right? So we're trying to make those connections here. So we're trying to engage what we've been reading. I selected two different books. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have something?
Nope, I'm just trying to chill out.
You look so chill.
Well,
on the outside.
Good.
Okay. So the first of the two books that I wanted to talk about. So I selected both a book from the affect side and one from the data science side. And particularly, the first book that I selected that we'll talk about today is called The Affect Reader. And I selected it even though it was like a daunting, like 450-page crazy textbook style. Just going into this class, I think that I didn't have as much knowledge up front of one of the key words of the name of the class. So I figured I better choose that book to sort of catch up on it.
Very wise.
Thank you. So The Affect Reader, if I was to sort of sum it up, is like a handbook of effectual research that's already been done. That's sort of, it's a collection of essays from different researchers that have applied affect into their research in a lot of different ways, like across the spectrum of how it could be applied theoretically for culture studies type research. So I say handbook because it feels like it covers such a wide spectrum of how you might use affect for research of this nature that, you might want it at your side if you're starting to do affect research yourself in a more specific or a narrow kind of sense, then you might be able to refer to this handbook for a lot of different things. Does that make sense?
It does. I still don't know what affect research actually is, so I feel like I'm following you, but that piece is missing.
Well, can I put you on the spot for a second? Can you just, like, what if,
That's why I'm here.
like, what if you just, what would you say that you thought that meant? With whatever little understanding you have right now.
Well, I think that for me, just with like the English language, it's hard to remember what the difference between effect and affect is, because like I know my understanding is that they both have like something to do with like causation or like affecting. Well, see, I just used the word in the definition. You can't really do that, right? But changing things, or I suppose manipulating things, maybe, that I'm trying to find other like synonyms. So how do you affect something? Yeah, how do you change it, or how does what you do change it? I think I'm saying the same thing. So yeah, that's about all I know about affect, is just a normal word.
Okay. So I guess my understanding of at least the difference between affect and effect, which has always taken me forever. I feel like I've constantly been like using the wrong version in like at least like the, in the written sense for sure.
I agree.
But in
Me
this
too,
sort of
not you.
sense, like my understanding is that affect just has to do with like feelings and emotions. So if you were to apply affect theories into some sort of culture studies research, it would be like, well, how a person, an individual or a group, and their feelings, how are those associated with cultural phenomenon, or like, like revolution or particular movements like civil rights movement, or like a feminism sort of movement. So how do feelings and emotions come into play for that sort of stuff? But I thought it would be interesting because you were kind enough to offer your explanation, and I feel like I have like this sort of like dulled like understanding still to begin with, and I thought it would be fun to share what AI thinks affect theory is.
Okay.
So I've asked the computer, the robot. I asked ChatGPT to explain affect theory in regard to culture studies, and it's quite a long-winded answer. So feel free to jump in, and maybe we can just try to decipher what the robot thinks of it, but I'll just go through it.
Okay.
All right, ChatGPT says, affect theory within the context of cultural studies is a theoretical framework that examines the role of emotions, feelings, and affective experiences in shaping and understanding cultural phenomena. It emphasizes the significance of affective responses and their influence on individual and collective behavior, as well as the construction and interpretation of cultural practices, meanings, and identities.
You always read too fast for me.
Oh, all right. I'm gonna do. Should we start over, or should I just continue slower?
Continue slower.
In affect theory, affect refers to the intensity and duration of a person's emotional response or bodily sensation, which can be experienced consciously or unconsciously. It is different from emotions, which are considered culturally and socially constructed responses to specific situations or stimuli. Affect theory focuses on the more immediate and pre-linguistic bodily reactions and sensations that can shape and frame emotional experiences. Affect theory challenges the traditional understanding of culture as a purely cognitive or discursive phenomenon and highlights the embodied and non-representational aspects of human experiences. It suggests that affective responses are not separate from cultural processes, but are integral to them. Affect theory argues that affective experiences play a crucial role in how cultural meanings are produced, transmitted, and received. In cultural studies, affect theory has been applied to various areas of analysis, such as media and popular culture, art, politics, and everyday life. It explores how affective responses and bodily sensations are provoked and manipulated through cultural forms, including images, texts, sounds, and performances. It investigates how affective states are generated, circulated, and harnessed in cultural practices and discourses. Affect theory also addresses the power dynamics involved in affective experiences and how they intersect with issues of gender, race, class, and other social categories. It examines how affective intensities can reinforce or challenge social norms and structures, and how they contribute to the formation of individual and collective identities. Overall, affect theory offers a valuable perspective within cultural studies by highlighting the embodied and affective dimensions of culture, recognizing the role of emotions and sensations in shaping human experiences, and emphasizing their significance in the production and interpretation of cultural meanings and practices. Whew.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, they didn't use a lot of words that I've never heard before, which is nice, but they did use the word affect. You know, like I criticized my own definition, but they use the word affect a lot
Right.
in the definition.
They sure did.
And
The robot did.
Sure. They have personhood? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's a slippery slope. It's like if we're willing to give that away so fast.
Yeah, that's freaky. So I don't understand, like, I feel like in the beginning they say it's different than emotions, that emotions are learned within a culture. And then I feel like they're still saying that it is emotions. I get the embodied part, or maybe like sensations, but then they keep saying and affective reactions or something like that. Like they keep using affect as the other part. So that's why it still feels a little...
So thanks for nothing,
Sure.
ChatGPT. I don't know if we quite got there yet. But maybe if we dive in. So the very first part that I actually read out of the Affect Reader was, one of the first articles or essays that was included. And it was called Happy Objects. And it used this example, which I think I read to you a little bit about, where it was talking about like the sort of delightful feeling when eating grapes.
I'm sorry. We're done with this one.
No, you can jump back to it.
I'm just reading that it says that it's emotional response or bodily sensation, consciously or unconsciously, but then it says it's different than emotions. So how is an emotional response different than emotions? So you're just saying maybe this is not a great...
Well, first of all, sure, the ChatGPT or AI could be flawed, and there's limitations to it, which is interesting that we could even tie that in because of like data science and stuff. That's actually jumping ahead to something I learned about also that was called the paradox of big data, which is that learning machines like this, AI is like learning from information that currently exists. But even like the ChatGPT, the OpenAI website that creates it will say, well, this is limited based on like data up to 2021. So it could be accurate to a point, but it has inherent sort of restrictions. So I guess, yeah, there's reasons why this might be wrong, or it might be explaining it in not the greatest way. So I was trying to make sense of this, and in that first essay, I was saying that there was an example that was given about the delightfulness of grapes, and it could be like the delight might come from eating a delicious grape.
And that's a bodily sensation?
Right, the feeling of delight because of the deliciousness of the snack.
But I mean, like, what is delight, though?
Okay.
Is that a bodily sensation? Like, is it like a flutter somewhere, or is it like...
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's interesting. So how would you describe, like, what is the physical embodiment of delight?
Yes.
Is that it? Did you just experience some?
No, that was the embodiment of humor. I don't know.
Okay. Well, what I found interesting about it, I mean, it's fun to explore that too, because really, yeah, what does delight mean? Is it a certain sensation, a certain part of the body that reacts or something like that? But then they described it as, well, it's not just the act of eating the grape is what it's delightful, but maybe there's like a nostalgic feeling around some other grape experience that you've had. And is that what causes the delight?
So that's interesting because that feels like which I mean, maybe it's all part of the same thing, but like to me, like embodiment is like definitely like more in your body. So kind of like here and below, but then like a memory is, well, I mean, I guess depending on how you think of it, it could be like stored in the tissues, but like
All depends on definitions, doesn't it?
yes, generally is like a cerebral thing, like a brain thing, right? Like a memory. So those seem pretty different, but then I suppose maybe they're saying that the memory or the tie to a memory is what then like brings that same bodily sensation back. So it's not necessarily the current tasting of the grape.
Right.
Is that what it is?
I mean, like, what if? Yeah, because there's got to be a situation where someone somehow lost their sense of taste,
Yeah.
but they would still feel delight surrounding grapes because they once loved grapes.
Well, maybe, or maybe they feel total despair because they can no longer taste grapes.
Yeah, sure. So the affect, right? Whatever affect someone is feeling can change for sure.
Okay.
So I tried to, maybe you remember this from earlier, this just happened earlier today. I tried to put this into, like, take that grape example and turn it around into something a little bit more tangible about our own lives and maybe make my own example out of something similar to see if I could understand it right. So I asked our youngest daughter, Lucy, who's 7 now, and I asked her if she felt joy, I think it was, going to McDonald's. Do you remember?
I do.
And she said yes. And then I said, well, what is it about McDonald's that gives you so much joy? And then she started to sort of like rattle off some of the different things. So I'm wondering, like, do you have to narrow? Is it like the overall experience? Is it like McDonald's the name? Or is it McDonald's that's like, at least in our family, that going there is like a treat? Like it's not all the time? Mm-hmm. Or is it like usually who their companions are when they go there that makes it fun? Or the fact that they get a Happy Meal and they get a toy with it? Like, what are the things? Mm-hmm. Like, what is responsible for the emotional response, I guess? So I wonder what your thoughts are about how even one simple thing, like if we generalize that McDonald's gives me joy, sure, then, like, do you see all the different ways that you could break that into different sort of directions of, like, areas of thinking about why McDonald's is joyful?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to tie that into how affect can be like a theoretical, like, lens based on, like, what direction you want to explore. But it seems so open-ended, it's, like, daunting.
Yeah. I definitely see that. I am curious at this moment, is it always in relationship to emotions? I guess it says right there that examines the role of emotions, feelings, and affective experiences, which is where I feel like that's a silly thing to say, but so
yeah.
Emotions, feelings. So it's always related to those things.
Right.
So words like joy, sadness, despair, like.
Right. And this particular, this first article that we've been talking about, it was called Happy Objects. So they specifically went and focused on the joyfulness or the happy side.
I'm curious about the McDonald's one that you brought up, though, because it's kind of, again, I don't know how much I should be like following the AI thing, but the AI definition, but it kind of says that different from emotions, which are considered culturally and socially constructed responses to specific simulation or situations or stimuli. And I was thinking, I was listening to Lucy respond earlier, she said the drink, that they could make their favorite drink with all the weird sodas mixed together,
Yep.
that people that they go with. You were kind of leading her a little bit, but she did eventually say that she liked the toy.
I got to work on that when it comes to doing, like, real epistemological research or whatever, like, not just.
Ooh, that's a fun way.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to throw them in there every once in a while.
Yeah, you're on the right track. But what I was, if I could finish that, I wonder if, I think it's more about like the rareness of the experience. Like if we went to McDonald's and got them a Happy Meal every day at lunch, it probably wouldn't feel the same. And especially, I think that like, especially in the beginning, it was like this thing that only like daddy would take them to do, right? So it was like almost like.
Because I'm a great parent. That's the reason.
Well, I didn't say that. Yeah. I think it's fine to do fun things, but I think that it was like, it was never like, oh, well, let's just go to McDonald's. It's we've like taught them that McDonald's is like fun and special and like, oh, look, you know, maybe even like your dad loves to go to McDonald's. Like it feels like this generational like McDonald's is special. It's
well,
a
that's
treat.
really interesting. So those affectual responses can be like curated or like formed. Right, like there could be very well like a different person that like actually like grew up in McDonald's was sort of like a norm, right? Like quick through the go through the drive-through, get the value meal, whatever, and then you're out of there. And now it's like kind of like a standard dinner, and because of those patterns, then you wouldn't experience it the same way.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think that perhaps it could be like the total opposite. Like, we generally cook home-cooked meals, and we take the time to, try to bring in like nutritious ingredients and stuff like that. And I just mean like perhaps like a person who's going to McDonald's for almost every meal, whether, financially they have to do it that way or circumstances, whatever. And then they get this like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that our kids don't really value that like takes work. I don't know, like soup, like like chicken soup with, although they do kind of like that. I'm trying to think of one that.
So you're saying something that they would have to put a lot of work into that they wouldn't necessarily appreciate, even though it's like ultimately better. Is that what you mean?
No, I just mean like that something that is their normal, like another person might be like, this is amazing, this is so much fun, like, and they could, and like sitting down at like a family table and being like, having cloth napkins or whatever, like that experience would be like so fun because that's not their normal, like that it could just be like out of the normal, and maybe, I don't know. I might be going too deep in this example.
No, I mean, I think the deeper and the more obscure, the better is what I'm learning. I think that's accurate. You guys let me know. All right, so I wanted to. So one more area from the Affect Reader. I read another article that was. Let's see, who was that one by? Brian Masumi. This one was called "The Political Ontology of Threat." So as opposed to dealing with happy object, this is particularly dealing with the affect, emotional response of threat.
Can I say one other thing?
Sure.
I thought you read a little bit of the happy article to me, and I just thought it was really cool because I think it's so. When was that one from? Do you know?
No, I didn't mark the year.
Well, I think like currently we're so into the negative everything in our culture, so it was really interesting to me to just be like, oh, let's really examine something that generally has more of a positive.
Yeah, the positivity part of it all. Right. That is interesting. So in this article about the political ontology of threat, they use the example of back in the George W. Bush days of like invading Iraq and capturing Saddam Hussein and doing that under the guise of, well, there's weapons of mass destruction there.
Sure.
And so the most fascinating part about this article that I picked up on was that culture or humans have reached a point where they no longer base their idea of threat on the past, but on the like anticipation of the future defines the present. So so George W. Bush claimed that there was weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that posed a threat, so we had to do something about it. We went and did something about it, found out there was no weapons of mass destruction, but then was able to flip the narrative to, well, they have the potential to, so it's good that we did anyway.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have any thoughts about like that whole like the potential future dictates our feelings of today.
Do I have any thoughts at all about that?
Sure. I mean, I can.
that really what
I
you
actually see thoughts like sometimes coming out of you, but you
Well,
want to share one or two? That'd be great.
Sure. Well, I think like for me, I don't know. I mean, would you like me to share like in context? Because for me, like that brings up our nervous system state.
Yeah.
Should I go
Yeah.
there?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Deep dive.
So what I've learned in the last few years is that like whether you're functioning in a sympathetic or a parasympathetic nervous system state determines like so many things, but like our ability to relate to the present and just handle the present without pulling experiences from the past or projecting too far into the future or like worrying too much about the future, because both of those things can cause your body to react as if the threat was currently happening. And that, you know, that has functional changes in your body that you can't sustain for very long, especially if the threat isn't currently happening. So I think that's like a cultural issue.
But it seems like it at least makes sense from like a nervous system response that like if something truly negative or traumatic happened from an experience in the past, if something similar to that experience started to present itself currently, that you would feel some level of you were threatened by it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point, but I think that like of why we evolved this way is certainly to keep ourselves safe. But I think that because of our ability to like create story around everything, that we like overdo that. And like what I don't even remember. I mean, I kind of remember that stuff, but like what's the point of the article? He's saying that.
Well, he's using the example of the weapons of mass destruction scenario as like an example of both how actions were taken because of like a potential future threat instead of a current one. And also just sort of then breaking that down and explaining, well, then after it was discovered that it in fact wasn't a current threat either, but then saying, well, but there's the capacity for it to be like threatening still. So then making it self-righteous even though it was potentially the wrong decision at the time.
Yeah. So what does that have to do with affect theory? Is he looking at it through the lens of affect theory?
Yeah, right. And I guess it can be brought back to, well, something that we didn't actually mention before, but with any of these things in affect is like it's subjective, right? Like who feels threatened by what, right? Like, you know, I might feel threatened the next time I get on my bike, but you probably won't.
Well...
or maybe it affects you because of our closeness, right?
Yes, I have thought about that. Like, oh gosh, and even our kids, you know, they were like, "Oh, you actually really can get hurt," and like,
yeah.
But I'm wondering about the specific article. Like, I'm curious now because like we started out this conversation by like defining affect theory. So like, what is different about the way that this person looked at the example of threat through the bush?
Right. Okay. So I think maybe this one will help. This is one of the key words that I wrote down that I didn't really understand from this particular article. And it's called operative logic. And it says that that operative logic combines ontology with epistemology to give itself powers of self-causation. So you're like combining these two experiences and to explain why it happens, I guess.
Can you say that again?
Well, again, this is just something that I wrote down, but this is supposed to be sort of explaining what operative logic is. It combines ontology with epistemology to give itself powers of self-causation. So like the logic itself sort of determines why things occur a certain way.
I don't know what ontology and epistemology mean.
Oh, man. That's a tricky one. What about this one? Ontogenetic effectiveness, which is the surplus of reality that has not yet happened. These are like the things that I'm like, what are we doing here? Crazy, right?
Yeah, it feels very I don't know what the right word is, but like not tangible.
Intangible.
Is that right?
That's the one.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like there might be, it's like pretty close, but a different word of like just out there.
Yeah.
Not based in like facts and reality, which I guess is true. Right?
Maybe that is true. Well, now that we've thoroughly gotten ourselves in the weeds about affect, maybe it's a good time to try to connect it to the other sort of more data science into this. So I'm reading this. The other text that I'm reading is called Pattern Discrimination, and it's another collection of essays, but only 5 of them instead of more like 5 or 6 per section. So it's just kind of going through some of these things, and really what I'm trying to connect here is like, how do you take something as subjective as affect and emotional responses to something, and how can you quantify that and make research out of it? So I guess that's the big question. So how do you do that?
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you because I'm hoping that you know, and we'll make it easy.
I don't know. I mean, what I've been exposed to my whole life is some sort of multiple choice or like from no to neutral to yes kind of thing. But
So like giving a survey?
yeah, I guess
To a
so.
sample?
Yeah, if you want to quantify something, then you have to like limit options, right? And
Right.
that's like the standard way. And then all that can be used to analyze in a, numbers way.
Yeah. So the tools that we've been introduced to in this class to make it a little bit more unique than I think maybe what we're sort of describing is maybe an old school method. It's not like it's surveys and samples or over or something like that. But what we're doing is exploring with these analytical tools that allow you to take information from social media platforms like Twitter or YouTube or something, and then take a particular, say, entry or a user and say, like, search anything directed at this Twitter user with the word bigot and collect any of the posts that have that word. And then you can sort of analyze it. And then you, of course, can place other parameters on it, like filter it by how many likes or retweets there are, right? And then you can start to get a collection of like, well, this many people have this much hatred, right? And then you can start to lump words that are being used in your post, like language, like does this fit as negativity or does this fit as hatred? And then you can sort of gather information in that sense.
It's so interesting. I totally am following with the likes and retweets. That seems very concrete, like nobody can argue against that. But then if someone's deciding which words are negative and positive and things like that, right? That seems like it gets right back into it's very subjective.
Right. I'll give you an example of that because there's like some existing like data banks of these kind of things. So it's like, let's say that I decided that I wanted to do some sort of search on, I'm just going to continue to use this as an example because it's relevant. So like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is running for president now. So if I want to filter out tweets that are like negative towards the Florida governor, then there's this existing chart or database of, quote, like swear words. And it's like 500 words deep. This is just including the English language, right? But then I'm looking at this list and it has things like arse or like butthole. It's like, so, I mean, those words could be used in a non-swear word, or who really considers those swear words? It's like, I'm an old school radio guy and I'm used to the 7 dirty words. There was 7. And even those are like sort of outdated and not necessarily swear words. So like what really constitutes this list and who's making the list? And how will that affect the data that you collect?
I think it will affect it very much.
Very much so. That's correct. So we've been at it for a little while. I did want to share this one thing that I thought was interesting. So actually, towards the beginning, you sort of had me jump ahead because you were talking about maybe the AI got some of this stuff wrong.
Yeah.
And so there was this concept that was presented in the pattern discrimination book that was called the the paradox of big data. And basically what that says is that the paradox of big data both affirms and denies that interpretive nature of knowledge. It's dependent on interpretation, but its interpretive capabilities are limited by algorithmics. So ultimately, that the limitations of the tool define the limits of the interpretation of the thing.
That makes sense.
So they provided this really crazy example. I couldn't believe that this was a real thing. So they're talking about the errors in sort of machine learning, right? Computers being given data and then trying to improve the system to which they work, right? So they gave this example where if you were a Google user and you had unlimited supply of like cloud space if you wanted to import your photos, right? As long as you opted into their facial recognition program, right? Normally you have to pay for space on the cloud, but if you didn't want to pay and you wanted an open-ended amount of space, that was free and available to you as long as you would allow Google to track your face and know who you were.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was happening was this AI, this Google system was learning how to do this and how to quickly, as you're uploading these images, it makes sense of who you are and where you're at and stuff like that. But what it said was that it was having trouble and that sometimes actually identifying African American people as gorillas, which is like obviously a problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can see the inherent problems of machines learning things the wrong way and how long did they learn it the wrong way and how big of a problem that might have become in the process.
Yeah, and I suppose the question that comes into my mind, the question that comes into my mind is, what is this used for? Because, if it was used in any sort of like my mind just jumps to like some sort of punitive thing, then it would be a really big deal. I mean, of course, we don't want bad data either, but I don't know. I feel like at this time in history, you have to be super choosy about like what you're going to put value into in the first place. But I was like, oh gosh, like what if somebody like gets in trouble with the government because of something like that, because of being identified in the wrong, like that's what's really creepy about it to me. But go ahead.
Well, I just think that the subjective nature of it all makes it really challenging, but it also, I mean, it's like both challenging and exciting. It's like, well, that means that I could research anything. I could take this in so many different directions.
But I think it's also another thought that came to me is with this specific example, the limitation is those that value unlimited cloud space over perceived privacy. I don't know if it's truly privacy, but
True.
You know what I mean? So you're going to have a skewed population with which you're gathering data.
Right. Who are the ones that are willing to participate?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow. Well, I think we successfully, wow. I mean, like, thank you. We really got somewhere with that.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. All the ideas just floating out of your head.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. It was interesting.
All right, that's it for episode 1 of Trying to Make Sense Out of Affect and Data Science class. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.